Hello everybody, my name is Veen Sacrosanct and this is my first attempt to make some sort of tutorial video, and I would like you to introduce the epic Roland R8 drum machine, which also is a fabulous hardware sequencer. The R8 was released of course by Roland in the 80s and when it was released it was by then their top of the line drum machine. It is also credited as one of the most industrial sounding drum machines of that era. There are some people who complain about the way you need to program a sequence in the R8 because it was kind of difficult. It was also the manual that came with it back in the days. It was a very beefy manual, but it was a very good actually. I have to say, once you get to know the way you need to program sequences on this machine and you get the hang of it, it's pretty easy. Now for this video I hooked up the Roland to a Korg Minilogue. I think everyone knows what a Korg Minilogue is, and that it's also a very good analog synthesizer. It is not too expensive, it is not too cheap, it's very hands-on, and it is very versatile and very easy to program patches on it. But first of all I'm going to explain how I hooked everything up. So I'm using my laptop as a clock device. It is a means of sending clock to hardware gear. And the way you can set this up in Cubase is you go to transport and you open this project synchronization setup, and then you get a window and you simply click destinations on it. So I'm also using this M-Audio MIDI Sports 4x4, which is a pretty decent MIDI interface. This MIDI interface also is very cheap, and yeah, in my studio and for what I use it, it has never let me down. So this MIDI interface is connected to Cubase by a USB cable. And if you open the project synchronization menu, you can then scroll through each individual input or output. And since the R8 is connected on the first port of the MIDI interface, I just switched on these boxes, and also these three boxes are highlighted, and then you have the capability to let your PC sending clock through to the MIDI interface, and then the clock is going over a classic MIDI cable into the Roland R8. Now some people who are acquainted with the Roland R8, they do know that there is a MIDI in, a MIDI out and a MIDI through, which makes it ideal to receive clock signals coming from a DAW or from any other hardware device, and you can use it as to send MIDI sequences to another piece of kit, like here in this video, the Korg Minilogue. So to sum it all up, Cubase is sending clock to the MIDI interface, and the clock is then sent or directed, which is a better word. Yeah, I'm from Belgium, so my English is not as good as it's supposed to be, so excuse me for that. But anyway, the MIDI interface directs it by a simple MIDI cable to the Roland, and then the MIDI output goes to the input of the Korg Minilogue, and this way you can send a clock from your PC to the Roland R8, so it is in sync with your DAW, and then you can program a sequence on the Roland R8, and from the moment you hit the start button in Cubase, your Roland R8 will automatically start playing a sequence, which is then sent to the MIDI log. The sequence gets played by the MIDI log, and then it gets recorded back into Cubase. Now, what I first did is I laid out every note that I wanted to use in my sequence. I laid it out on these 16 buttons, so I have a means of chromatically program a sequence in the R8. So, how do you make this button to play this note on the MIDI log? If you go to this option, displaying MIDI, then you can see that if you hit this, you can see it's a dry kick. And this also says kick. So if I hit the snare, the sound, the definition of the pad changes. But you can see every time when I push a button, the note also changes. Now, the way this is done, it's very easy. First of all, when you go to this button MIDI, you have some options. You have a transmit channel, a receive channel, and the third option is the note. So it says 3, so if I push button 3, I get this menu saying note number assign. If I press like the dry kick here, it says C4. And I can change these notes by pushing the off or on button, which is minus or plus. And every time when I go, I can choose every note I want. And when I just press the button that is assigned to the dry kick, I can change it. So it is very easy. So if I want to assign a note to the second button, and I want a C cross, I simply use the minus or plus buttons to change that note. So this method allows you to assign any note you want and lay them out on the 16 buttons. So I am able to pre-assign 16 notes on these 16 pads by simply pressing the MIDI button, number 3, and then hit the corresponding pad and then change the note by minus or plus. And it's very, very easy to program notes and lay them out on these 16 buttons on the Roland R8. It is a very easy machine to program. So when you are finished assigning each note to each individual pad on the Roland R8, you're able to program a sequence on it. Now, the way to do this is to look at these 3 buttons. You have a song mode, a pattern mode, and a MIDI mode. So if we want to program a sequence on the Roland R8 is actually called a pattern. So what we need to do is push this button, pattern, and then you see a menu displayed saying 1 play, 2 step, 3 reel, and 4 preset. So to program a sequence step by step, excuse me, we are going to choose number 2. So we need to push the 2 button on to change the display. If you are in this menu, you are able to scroll through each individual pattern using the minus or the plus button. So if I press the plus button, you can see that the pattern number is changing. So each pattern that contains notes or contains a sequence is displayed by this sign. So if you want to program an empty sequence on an empty pattern, we need to look for a clean pattern, of course. Therefore, we are going to look for one. And here we are. Pattern 13 does not contain the previous symbol, but now we can see a little star, which means that this pattern does not contain any note or whatsoever. Now you can always go back to the previous menu by simply pressing the mode pattern button one time again. There we have them. We press the 2 button here and we are back in the previous in the menu that we need to program a sequence on. Now let's say that for the first 3 notes that I would like to program in this pattern is this sound, which is a C4. In order to do this, we first need to select the sound which we want to program, which, when I said before, is the C4. If I then press the Start Stop button, you can see that it is in recording mode, and you can see this button flashing with a red light. And now I am able to assign the C4 into this grid. So if I play the first button, it is displayed on the first place in this grid. And as you can hear, the Roland automatically starts repeating this sound on its exact position. So it makes a kind of loop, which is exactly what you want, of course. Now let's say that I want a C4 on the 4th place in the grid. What I need to do is to push the 4th button in record mode. So we are going to start record mode again. And as you can hear, the first note is being played, but from the moment I press the 4th button, you can see a dot on the 4th place, and immediately the Roland starts playing the 2 notes. This way I am able to lay every note that I want to play in the sequence in this grid. Now the 3rd note I would like to place on the 7th position of the grid. So what are we going to do? We are going to play this button. So now I have three notes laid out on the grid. One on the 1st, one on the 4th, and one on the 7th. And each time I press the recording button, the Roland starts playing the notes in the right order. Now let's say that for the 4th note, I want another sound. This one. And we want this sound to be placed on the 10th position of the grid. So we need to do as before. We need to select the sound that we want to program, which is this note. And then we need to start by recording by pushing the record button again. And then we are going to press number 10. Now, if we are not satisfied by the position and we would like to change the position from 10 to 11, we need to start recording again. And you notice from the moment that I hit the number 10 again, the note on the 10th position has disappeared. So let's say that I want to program it on the 11th position. See, it is that easy. So the final note of my sequence is this sound. And as you know by now, you first need to choose a sound before you can start recording it into a sequence. So we select the sound, we press the start stop button, the recording starts, and then we can decide on which position in the grid we want this sound to be programmed. Once you are satisfied, you just stop the recording and then your programming of the sequence is done. Now, once you have recorded a complete sequence, you obviously want to play with it. So therefore we go back to the mode pattern menu. And now we are not going to select the step mode, but we're going to select the play mode, which is this button, number 1. Now we are into play mode, and when we select the same pattern as where we programmed the sequence in it, and we hit the start button, you can hear your programmed sequence being played by the Roland R8. Now this way you can program many sequences in the R8. And the advantage of the Roland R8 when you compare it to older sequences, to older sequencers like an MSQ 700 from Roland or an MC 500 or a PR 100 is that each sequence that you have programmed on the R8 is automatically saved in its systems. So every time you switch off the R8, all your sequences are stored in its internal memory. With the older sequencers, you needed a floppy disk or something else to save your sequences on. This gives this machine a very good advantage and a very good way to program your own sequences and to keep them for a very long time and use them in any production that you want. So this is a short tutorial. I hope you liked it and I hope you like this machine. This machine in particular I got from Gin Devo from Vomito Negro. I bought it from him some years ago and it is still in very good condition. It was bought brand new by Gin from Vomito Negro and I got it from him for a very fair price, and it is still in full functioning and working condition. So the way they built sequences or drum machines back in the days, they were built like a tank. So I hope to see you next time and I hope you enjoy this video. Cheers.